This is Brent. Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. We're going to go now to Stansbury's commentaries on the Constitution for a few minutes. We're getting closer to the end, 333 questions, published the year 1828, the same year as Webster's dictionary. Stansbury, like Webster, was a hardcore Christian man. Stansbury was a clergyman. Webster was a Christian. By the way, Noah. Dan was the senator from New Hampshire. Noah Webster was a hardcore, what folk call today a Calvinist. I've taken time to study his life because I've picked up a few things about me that piqued my interest in him. He grew up on a farm up there in New England, and his father mortgaged the family farm to send him to Harvard. And in those days, Harvard wasn't as well known as it is today, but it was well known in America, and he wanted his boy to get a good education. And again, in those days, Harvard was a Bible college chartered for that purpose. Puritan John Harvard was the instrument that founded it, and John Harvard, to start it, he was a Puritan preacher. He donated, back in the 1600s, he donated his personal library. At his death, he donated it to start Harvard College. In his personal library were books, commentaries, Greek and Hebrew, grammar books, things like that. And I just had a few students that came there that wanted to study and learn how to teach the Bible. That's where Noah went to school. His father mortgaged the farm, and his father lost the family farm trying to send Noah to get an education. Oh, the sacrifices that men made. But he, of course, has become a great blessing to us as Americans. And his dictionary, he translated the Bible into English from the original tongues, from the Greek and the Hebrew tongues of the ancient manuscripts, called the Webster's translation of the Bible. I have a copy of it around here somewhere. Then after he did that, he said the next thing he wanted to do was make a dictionary of American English, a dictionary that defined every word in the English word in the popular translations of the Bible. The Geneva, the King James were primary. He felt like he'd studied through the words of the Bible in the original tongues. He'd got somewhat of a handle on the concepts. He wanted every word in our English tongue as Americans to have the meaning that the Bible gives to the word. When you look at Webster's dictionary, you're not getting what all other dictionaries give you. What they give you is how the words are used. Now, he does that too, but the dictionaries don't define words, most of them. They just tell you, well, here are the usages we have discovered. This is how people use the word. And they'll have the first 1, 2, 3, and they'll put it that way. Webster didn't strictly do that. He said, well, here's what the word means as God uses it. That's pretty heavy duty. Now, I don't know that he was right in every case, but he certainly did strive toward that goal. He wanted it so that Americans would become speakers of English that were tied in their words to our English Bible. A noble endeavor, to say the least. That's how intense he was in the importance of the Bible. He felt during his life that he felt the weight of what had happened in his family, losing the farm, sacrificing the farm, so he could have an education that would allow him to, for example, translate the Bible into English and also to draw up the Webster readers, which were #1 popular readers in America, and they were biblically based to the nth degree for the first grade, the second grade, the third grade, the fourth grade. They're very good. And he knew he had to get to young people, worked very hard at it. Later on, the McGuffey readers, a man named McGuffey, he wrote the readers 1 through 8, and those eclipsed the Webster readers. The McGuffey readers were as good or better, and by the way, those prevailed in America from way back in the middle of the 1800s, clear up to World War II. Those prevailed in our schools. And if you're homeschooling your children, by the way, or your grandmas and grandpas, and you know your children are homeschooling their children, I encourage you in the strongest of terms to get those readers. They're reprinted. You can get them 1 through 8. And every day they're designed for a daily basis. Every day you do another lesson. He put a lot of work into those. The Webster readers were that way too, but I like the McGuffies. Not that I disliked the Websters, but the McGuffies were even finer tuned. In other words, McGuffey, as one fellow said, if McGuffey, this is an analogy from a famous man, I forget his name, maybe it was Sir Isaac Newton. But people said, well, let me just say it. If McGuffey's readers are better than Webster's, it's because he could see further than Webster. But why could he see further than Webster? Reason? Because he was standing on Webster's shoulders. That's why. And each of us, as time goes on, we just continue the conversation. If I see anything that somebody else hasn't seen, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of men that saw farther than farther than the men that had gone before them. We're all climbing up and learning from others, and then, whoa, I see something else. That's what it is. Don't give any credit to yourself. You're just climbing up higher on what others have done. Well, I look at Webster that way. I took my children through the McGuffey readers. And the reason was because my great grandmother used to ask my brother and I to read to her when she was very ancient. Read to her from her McGuffey readers that she had when she was a girl, starting in the year 1880. That's when she started school. And then for the next 8 years, 1888, she kept her McGuffey readers. And I used to think that she just wanted to hear them. But then I found out later, I finally figured out she was trying to teach us to read. She couldn't see for nothing. And even when we were reading on McGuffey readers when we were little children, we'd come to a word we didn't know. She'd tell us what it was. She had them blamed near memorized. Shucks, when she was in the 8th grade, according to her and my granddad, that was her son, Charles Melvin. Grandma was a Mackenzie. You talk about a colorful bunch. The stories I could tell about them. Charlie, I was a nephew to my grandmother. Leroy, we called him Cousin Leroy. That was Charlie's son. Funny thing about Charlie, and I never could figure it out, I liked Charlie a lot. He was road commissioner in Johnson Township for years. But he also had a job working at the feed mill, part-time road commissioner. Wasn't a full-time deal. Didn't have any money in Johnson County to pave the roads anyway. All they did was run the road graders and try to pull the gravel up in the road. And no gas stations in that whole township, so they didn't get a lot of money for roads. Charlie came out one time delivering feed out in a lot, had the truck with an auger on it, and my little brother was out there, and I was out there, and my little brother run around barefoot and half naked, belly button sticking out. Just a little tiny guy, could barely talk. And Charlie was a Democrat. Again, I never understood it, but because the Mackenzies were Republicans. Matter of fact, Grandma's father, even when he wore his bib overalls, I never knew him, but the pictures they had of him on the wall, even in his bib overalls, he wore his uh, Grand Army of the Republic medal. He was a founding member, Republican all the way. But Charlie wasn't. Of course, he lived in a Republican world there in Johnson Township, so he had to be nice to everybody. But he said my little brother was out there and he was getting the auger down, swinging it over to put it on the feeder. And he said to my little brother, he said, "You run to the house and tell your mother she's a Democrat." He was always bedeviling his friends and family. "You run to the house, tell your mother she's a Democrat." Well, see, one side of my mother's family were Democrats. That was the Kentucky side, and the others, but Mom wasn't, because Mom's mother and her family, they weren't. So you rent the house, tell your mother she's a Democrat. And my little brother just shake his head like that. And Charlie said, "Go on." He said, "Mm-mm." And Charlie said, "Why not?" He said, my little brother said, "That's a dirty word." I don't know who told him that. I never heard it said, but that's what he told Charlie. Well, Miss Francine, let me do if you'll cue up a song, we'll do a question or two here. Say we move forward a little bit. We said yesterday in Stansbury's commentaries on the Constitution that if you're in the Army, the Navy, uh, you don't get a jury trial if you're accused of a crime because you're under martial law. That's true, and rightly so. Um, Question from the Catechism. What other rights are secured to an accused person? Answer. Whoever is accused of a criminal offense, that means an offense for which he is to be tried by the state, shall have a speedy and public trial. He may not be confined longer than is necessary. That means jailed. We got all these fancy words like incarcerated, confined, false imprisonment. Why don't we just make it simple and say jail? I like that word. It's clear. Well, he may not be confined longer than is necessary, and he may be tried. He may not be tried in a secret place, but openly before all who choose to attend, and he shall have a jury of impartial men to try him. The trial by jury has been already explained. We did that above. The men who compose his jury must be of the same state, of the same district already formed before he was indicted, where the offense is said to have been committed. He must be fully informed of the nature of the charge brought against him and how it came to be made. Does the government always do this? No. We're talking about Bridger a while ago. Bridger's got an appellate lawyer. You know what that appellate lawyer is going to do? I know. I don't even have to study the case. I can tell you what he's going to do. He's going to do what all appellate lawyers do and what they ought to do. They ought to see if there's any violation of fairness in all those 7 years they were prosecuting him. Any violation of fairness. What do we call that? Violation of the process that is due and owing. What's that? A due process. Let me give you another name for it. Our common law tradition. Our common law tradition is not about did he rape, did he kidnap, did he plunder? No, it's about how do we decide whether he raped, kidnapped, plundered, murdered. That's due process. It is a course. All things are to be done fairly. Everybody involved is to have, at every point, fair notice. Fair. That means a timely notice of the place of the next contest, the next hearing, so you can prepare for it. And number two, due process fundamentally is a meaningful, not reasonable, meaningful. That's a little bit different. Synonym, genuine opportunity to be heard, to deliver your blows in this contest of battle. If you don't tell the other fellow where the contest is, he doesn't have an opportunity to fight. That's not fair. Then the other fellow says, well, he didn't show up. I win by default. It's not fair. That's what this lawyers were looking for in the record. And in our common law tradition, the record is kept in detail for that reason. That is not true. Watch me. That is not true in the rest of the world. You go to court, every word is recorded by the stenographer. The stenographer records every word. We make a record. It is a court of record. That's a common law idea. And not only that, one more thing I'll say, Miss Francine, then we'll be ready for a song. Our common law tradition, watch this, this is huge, is primarily and foremost oral. That means it is more spoken than in writing. Our trials are oral, face to face, as Justice Scalia used to say. We have the right to confront our witnesses against us. We have the right to confront them. What does that mean? Our Constitution explains nothing. It just says this is the way it is. Well, confront means cross-examination, another feature of our common law that does not exist in the rest of the world. Just a few common law countries, fundamentally, the English-speaking world. Cross-examination. What a tool, an engine of truth, a greater surety of truth than the oath by far. Well, oral. In all the rest of the world, trials are conducted primarily by trading paper and shuffling paper around and writing stuff to the judge. There is no jury. Very orderly, very elegant, very logical, very calm. I've gone to trials where judges have thrown things at people. I've been to trials where judges have gotten so incensed, and lawyers too, that they're at the verge of a fist fight in the courtroom. And if that doesn't happen, outside the courtroom, they'll take it. I've had lawyers challenge me to a fist fight. Let's go outside. I've had lawyers, I've been locked in anterooms around the courtroom with in one case, a lawyer who was 6.5 feet tall and had been a union thug lawyer. And the judge ordered the marshal, U.S. Marshal, to lock us in a room and settle the case. What an experience. That's like cage fighting. It didn't happen. Funny thing in that case, a lot of fellows are just bullies. Of course, we weren't allowed to have any weapons in there. Judge Mahoney, an Irish judge and a part-time law professor. He said, I want the U.S. Marshal to put you in this room over. I like Mahoney. I put you in this room over here, and I want the door shut, locked, and I want him to stand at the door and not let you out until you make a serious effort to settle this case. I'll tell you what I found out. He was a bully. If you're ready to scrap with a bully, he was a lot older than me, too. When you're ready to scrap with a bully, they get scared. And I got in the, I'm no fighter. I am no fighter. I'll do anything to avoid a fight. No kidding. Because you can't win in a fight. And the only time a fella ought to fight is when he has no other choice. Fisticuffs and all that. And our common law, by the way, commands that we not fight if we have any means of escape. And if you don't take that means of escape and a fight occurs, somebody is injured to any degree, it's your fault. It could be both of you's fault if there's a means of escape. So I'm giving you a little free counsel here. Take it. Don't be a fighter if you can avoid it. Now, there are those times, of course, that men can't avoid it, or women, by the way, or women. Same thing is true to using a sidearm or a long arm. You don't use that unless there's no other choice. And it's important that you think all these things through before something happens, so you react properly. That's, by the way, Miss Francine can vouch for this. I know I'm going a little longer. Miss Francine can vouch that training with a firearm is important for a whole lot of reasons. One of them is you know what you're going to do before things happen. You've planned out, you are trained to be safe and react on purpose and not out of panic or fear. Not out of panic or fear, but on purpose. That's the way God demands we fight. According to our common law tradition, escape if you can, and that's biblical, by the way. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.